And now, ladies and gentlemen, I'll give the floor to Professor Xavier Sala-i-Martín in order to present his official lesson. If you please.
Mr. Rector, Mr. President of the Senate, Vice Deans, Vice Rectors, Professors, students, friends, musicians, thank you very much for this great honor. I'm humbled by your awards and really speechless. Thank God I prepared something and memorized, because I'm speechless. I think it was Groucho Marx that once said, after a wonderful introduction like the one I just received, Groucho Marx said, "Wow, after this great introduction, I can't wait to hear me speak." So that's what's happening to me now. Now I've been actually, this laudation, it was, very, very quick history of my life. I almost didn't remember those papers that I wrote as a student in 1992. I wrote the convergence paper when I was a student. And since then, I saw all my life going in front of me in a few minutes, which reminds me that I am quite old. Now, I want when they asked me to teach, to give a lesson on part of my research, I decided to talk about the economics of ideas. I want to talk about the importance of ideas in economics, but the main emphasis of what I want to say, and the title of this could have been why I was wrong. What Professor Litton said about many of the things that I did back then, now I think they're wrong. Okay, and I will tell you why. Okay, now let me start with introducing King MANSA MUSA. In 1280, 13th century, a boy was born, the son of King Keita of the Kingdom of Mali. The Kingdom of Mali, and his son was called Moses, which in Mandinga is spelled Musa. This kid became the largest emperor in Africa, the emperor of the largest kingdom of Africa. Mali at the time was a very, very rich country, full of gold mines. The richest gold mines in the world were in Mali. He had an unbelievable amount of wealth. With this wealth, he created cities. He created the big capital of the country called Timbuktu. He hired the best architects of Spain. He brought philosophers, mathematicians, astronomers to Timbuktu from all over the Islamic world. And he had about 60,000 servants who cooked his food and made his dresses. Now he famously made a trip. He was a Muslim. He famously made a lifetime trip to Mecca in 1320. He took his 60,000 servants with 12,000 friends, went through the Sahara Desert all the way to Cairo and then to Saudi Arabia. And these 60,000 servants, each of them were carrying 1 kilo of gold, 120 camels with 100 kilos of gold. Every village they went through, they gave away the gold. 20 years years later, the poets of Alexandria were still talking about that trip and how much wealth these guys spent as they passed through. Now, if you compute the total amount of wealth that this guy had, right? You get the tons and tons of gold that he had, and you put it in today's prices, he would own about $400 billion. Okay, that's 5 times more than Bill Gates, who is the richest man alive today. Okay, and he would be the richest man in history. MANSA MUSA is the richest man in history. But you know what? He never ate pizza. He never ate chocolate. When he arrived home, he couldn't turn on the lights. When he went to the bathroom, he couldn't push a button and the waste would disappear. When he had a headache, he wouldn't take aspirin. When he did at age 40, he didn't see very well. He couldn't buy glasses. So he went blind. When he had to travel to Mecca, it took about 2 years. He didn't take a plane, which takes about 6 hours. When he had to communicate with his fellow kings from Europe or the rest of Africa, he had to send emissaries with horses. It would take months. It would take months to send a message. It would take months to get the message back, because he didn't have WhatsApp. Yes, he had a big library with thousands and thousands of books. Okay, but when he wanted to consult something, he had to go to the library. He had to have servants go to the library. Most of the books in the world, most of the knowledge was not available to him because he didn't have Google. He didn't have Wikipedia. And you know what? All of these things that he didn't have, the average worker of the average country today, they have. And this is the great miracle of economics. How did we make this possible? The average person of the average country, the average person in Romania is a worker. The average worker in Romania is richer than the richest man in history. How is that possible? Well, first lesson we learn from this is that money is not wealth. Right? He had lots and lots of money, but he was not a very rich guy. Because money is worthless unless you have stuff to buy. You put Bill Gates in an island with all his money, with all his Microsoft stock, alone in an island. He has the same amount of money. He's poor because he cannot buy anything with that money. The wealth of a person, the wealth of a nation is not the amount of money or gold you have. Is the amount of stuff you can buy. That's why we economists, when we compute the wealth of nations, we don't look at the amount of gold or the amount of euros, right? We use that gross domestic product. Our wealth is what we produce, not what we own. Okay, so that's the first lesson. Now, this average person of an average country today, this morning had breakfast. Right? Maybe had some cereal, some tea, maybe eggs, lemonade, bread, croissant. Right? Did you think about how hard is it to make those things? How long would it take for you to make a coffee? Not to make a coffee with a coffee machine. No, make a coffee from scratch. Do you know how to make coffee? How long would it take for you to make the coffee machine? Can you make coffee machines? Can you make a croissant? Can you make the wheat that is used to make the croissant? Can you make the sugar? How long would it take for us to make one breakfast? It would take months and months and months. Yet, every one of us this morning, we went to a bar, to a restaurant, home, right? We asked, can you have a croissant? And in 20 seconds, you have a croissant. How miraculous is that? Isn't it a wonderful system? Well, that's the reason, that's the key question in economics. Right? The key question in economics, actually the first question of economics was asked by Adam Smith. And the question is, how can that happen? How could we become so rich that we go like this and we get a coffee. Something that if we were left alone in an island, it would be impossible. You would not be able to make coffee. You would not be able to even make breakfast, let alone clothes, or housing, or an iPhone. And that's the key question. Why are some nations rich and some nations poor? Well, this miracle of economics is best understood if we think of humanity as a social animal. Homo sapiens is a powerful animal because it's a social animal. Individual Homo sapiens are very weak individuals. We would not be able to fight almost any animal. Even chimpanzees are stronger than us. If we leave a chimpanzee or a human or a lion or an ant in an island, we have the lower probability of survival of all the animals. We are completely useless animals if we work alone. The strength of human beings is the ability to cooperate. Individual humans are weak, but we as a group, when we cooperate, because we are able to cooperate in ways that no other animal is able to, then we become powerful. Then we dominate the earth. If instead of one human being left in an island, we leave 100 human beings, in no time they're going to dominate the island. They're going to change the landscape. They're going to build buildings. They're going to create an economy. They're going to destroy the whole thing too. That's the power of humanity. The ability to cooperate. And our ability to cooperate comes from a mutation. Right? We share 98% of our DNA with chimpanzees. Okay? But somewhere about 70,000 years ago, there was some mutation in our brain, something that we call the cognitive revolution, that changed our brain in two important directions. Number one, we were able to communicate. We were able to create a sophisticated language. Other animals have languages too, but no animal has the ability to communicate, to have a precise language with precise instructions. Right? We can say, you guys go south towards the river, while we are going to go north towards the mountain, and we're going to hunt the lion in the middle. No other animal can do that. We can convey instructions. So when somebody invents a boat or the way to put together some woods to have a boat to travel to Australia, we can tell other people how to do it, and they can imitate. Language was a great, great invention. But during the same cognitive revolution, something else happened in our brain. We understood the concept of exchange. No other animal can do that. Adam Smith famously said, you will never see a dog willingly exchange a bone with another dog. Well, not only dogs, chimpanzees. Next time you go to the zoo, try to tell a chimpanzee, I'll give you 6 bananas if you give me a massage. Chimpanzees don't understand that. The idea of exchange is something that only human beings understand. And that, according to Adam Smith, is the source of our wealth. The source of our ability to produce lots of stuff. Okay? Exchange with specialization, or as Adam Smith put it, division of labor, is what gives us productivity. Now, for those of you who are not economists, those of you who are economists already understand this, but if you're not economists, let me give you an example of why the division of labor actually makes us rich. Imagine that we have two people in a society. Let me call one a man and the other a woman. And let's imagine that in order to survive, we need to eat both roots, say carrots, and meat, say rabbit. And it takes a woman 2 hours to get the carrots, 2 hours of work, and it takes her 3 hours to get the rabbit. So in order to survive, she has to work for 5 hours every day. Men are a little bit slower. It takes the man 5 hours to get the carrots, 4 hours to get the rabbit. Right? Now the woman, if the woman were stupid, he would say, well, you are so useless. You male are so useless. I'm not gonna cooperate with you. Right? Because I'm better. See, I'm better at hunting rabbits and making carrots. You are useless in both grounds. And that would be a mistake. Because see, if given that it takes her 2 hours to get the carrots, she could say, or they both could say, well, why don't we do the following? I'm gonna specialize in carrots. Since it takes 2 hours to get carrots for me, it would take 4 hours to get carrots for both, right? So instead of hunting, I'm gonna use 2 hours to get the carrots for me, 2 hours to get the carrots for you. And you, useless male, are going to specialize in producing rabbits. Since it takes 4 hours to get 1 rabbit, it would take 8 hours to get 2 rabbits. So woman, are gonna get all the carrots, and you, male, are gonna get all the rabbits, and we're gonna exchange. Notice that at the end of the day, we have the same food. Same food, right? Everybody gets the carrots, everybody gets the rabbits. But notice that each one of them saved an hour. Saving an hour means productivity gains. We get the same cookies with less work. And that's the source of the wealth of nations. In fact, the wealth of nations becomes even larger when we realize that by her specializing in carrots, she becomes really good at producing carrots. So instead of 2 hours, it's going to take 1 hour to get 1 set of carrots. And therefore, through learning, she's going to save not to 1 hour, right? She's going to get carrots for her in 1 hour, carrots for him in 1 hour. Instead of 5 hours, she's going to work for 2 hours. She gains 3 hours of productivity. And the male also gets 3 hours gains of productivity. By learning, specializing, we learn and we become more productive. So the question is, what do we do with these gains of productivity? Well, we could do like lions. Lions, after they get their food, they lie down and they sunbathe for the rest of the day. Or we continue to work the same amount of good, produce extra carrots, produce extra rabbits, and allow people to do other stuff. We can create new sectors, new goods. We can hire people to make shoes. We can hire people to make bows and arrows, which will make us more productive in hunting rabbits. We can create bankers that give us credit. We can create security, right? We can hire people to protect us against foreign invaders or against lions. Or we can create, we can pay a set of people that send messages to the gods and create religions and churches, right? And that's what human beings have done. Right? That's how human beings have done. So, according to Adam Smith, the wealth of nations comes from this division of labor, specialization, and trade. Okay? And the best way to organize all of this is through these markets, right? We need to exchange. Exchange. You specialize in something, I specialize in something. So, thousands of people have specialized in producing little things. Some people produce eggs, some people produce the coffee, some people produce the coffee maker, some people produce little things. And then we exchange. In a way, we all have 60,000 people working for us. In a way, we are all MANSA MUSA. Right? He was rich because he was able to pay thousands of people to work for him. Actually, the market system allows us to do exactly the same. Thousands and thousands of people have cooperated to produce the coffee that I drank this morning. And we don't know them, right? I don't know who they are. But the market system allowed them, without me knowing who they are, allowed me to go to the coffee place, pay $1 and receive a coffee. That's the beauty of the market. Okay? Now that was the first theory of economic growth, Adam Smith. And after that, as mentioned by Professor Litton, thousands of theories have emerged. People that say that the key to this economic growth, the engine of economic growth, is not specialization and trade, is the physical capital, institutions, macro corruption, regulation, financial sector, inflation, deficits, right? You name it, tons and tons of theories. Okay, but my favorite theory is the theory of ideas. See, the reason why Mansa Musa didn't eat pizza throughout his life is that pizza had not been invented. right? Pizza didn't exist. He couldn't eat pizza. Actually, he couldn't, even if they invented pizza, they haven't discovered America. Tomatoes come from America. So he couldn't do a pizza before discovering America. He couldn't eat aspirin to deal with his headache because aspirin had not been invented. The key to economic growth is inventions, ideas, okay? Now this can be seen with the following experiment, right? All of you have a smartphone, right? When you go home tonight, don't do that. But think about what would happen. You smash your phone on the floor and separate all the different chemicals, okay? All the different materials and weigh them. Okay, actually, I did this. I have a TV show in Spain, and we did that. Actually, we took a phone, we smashed it, we collected all the different. We smashed an iPhone 6, and we weighed the result. Okay, and we found that an iPhone weighs about 37 grams. 27 of those grams come from plastic, 20 come from crystal, 14 from aluminum, 30 of lithium, mainly the battery. 15 of chrome. The cost of all of these materials, you multiply the weight of each of the piles times the price, 15 cents. So the material value of your phone is 15 cents. Yet, we pay about $850 for an iPhone. Why? Well, and in fact, if you do this, if you break the phone and you put it in different materials, it's going to be useless, right? You try to push it, you're not going to see any pictures. So what is the difference? Right? Clearly, the value of the iPhone is not the materials. Clearly, the value of the iPhone is the amount of ideas that it embodies. The idea of crystal, the idea of a touch screen, the idea of Angry Birds, the idea of WhatsApp, right? Tons and tons and tons of ideas all embodied in one little phone which weighs 135 grams. By the way, ideas have no weight, right? But that's most of the value. So there's a branch of economics or economic growth that essentially says that the key to economic growth, Adam Smith is partially correct, but the key is that some of those people that we can hire, right, after we hand our rabbits and get our carrots, we can hire people to make shoes and to make arrows and bows, but we can hire people to think, to create new ideas. And that is the true engine of economic growth. Now, ideas are a special type of goods. Okay? Now, for those of you who are not economists, we use a funny word to describe one of the characteristics of ideas, and that is that they are non-rival. This means that ideas can be used by many people at the same time. A carrot, if I eat a carrot, you cannot eat the same carrot. Right? So if 2 people want to eat carrots, we need to produce 2 carrots. If 1 million people want to eat carrots, we need to produce 1 million carrots. That's not true with ideas, right? I can use the Pythagoras theorem, and you can use the Pythagoras theorem at the same time. 1 million people can use the Pythagoras theorem at the same time. So if we want 1 million people to use an idea, we don't need to invent 1 million ideas. We need to invent one. And this is a very powerful insight for the world of ideas, because the exchange that I was discussing earlier, right? The exchange is very different when we exchange ideas than when we exchange goods, right? Suppose that we have 2 people, one that has Oreo cookies, an American, and a Chinese who has fortune cookies, okay? And they exchange, right? Originally, the American has 2 Oreo cookies, the Chinese has 2 fortune cookies. They exchange, okay? Now, before the exchange, every person had 2 cookies, right? After the exchange, everybody had 2 cookies. Do you agree? But now suppose that instead of exchanging cookies, they exchange the formula. I'm going to teach you how to make Oreos, and you teach me how to make fortune cookies. Before the exchange, each of us had 1 formula. After the exchange, each of us have 2 formulas. So if we have 10 people exchanging, each of us have 1 formula. After the exchange, we have Each of us has 10 formulas. If you have 1 million people with ideas and we exchange, after the exchange, each of us has 1 million formulas. The more people with ideas, the more everybody benefits. And that's the power of ideas. And with this in mind, humans, after the great cognitive revolution of 70,000 years ago, we have invented tons and tons of stuff. We invented utensils, languages, clothing, very important, right? Humans are the only animals that get clothing because we invented the needle 40,000 years ago, which allowed us to conquer the ice. Before that, we couldn't go north. We invent the little needle, then we put some clothes, and we could go north, and we could go through the Bering Strait to America and conquer the world. We domesticated animals and plants, agriculture. We invented villages, towns, and cities, wheel transportation. We domesticated metals, bronze, iron, then gold. And with this came bad things, right? When we domesticate metals, then we get powerful arms and empires and wars and slavery. We invented the written language, which we used first for accounting, then for law, religion, right? Hieroglyphics were to talk to the gods, to storytelling, to poetry. We invented money, coins, philosophy, math, geometry, algebra. We measure times. We invented the clock, the compass, navigation, powder, paper money. The printing press, which, by the way, democratized knowledge. The printing press allowed to all of those things that were written in books that only rich people could read. All of a sudden, everybody had access to knowledge. And after the printing press, this led to the Renaissance, the scientific revolution. Now, the world is the world of ideas. In my mind, the way I think about ideas is like a magic house. Okay, a magic house where initially there is one room, and this room has doors, right? And people go to this room, some ideas, some knowledge, open the door, and when you open the door, a new room magically appears. We amplify our knowledge. And as we amplify our knowledge, we keep finding new rooms, and with new rooms we find new doors, and with new doors we find new rooms, and we expand knowledge. Because ideas are non-rival, not every one of us has to invent something. We just need to communicate with people that are in the other rooms, and we need to learn from them. Okay? And every time somebody invents something, we can look. We don't need to invent agriculture twice, right? Somebody invented agriculture back 10,000 years ago. Look what they did, and we can do the same. Somebody invented bows, somebody invented the wheel. Once we see it, we can use it, because ideas are non-rival. And that's the great house of ideas that is continuously expanding. But there is one little problem. If you look at income, or our ability to produce, GDP, all of these inventions that I just mentioned, right, all the way to the Industrial Revolution, the technological revolution, didn't really affect our income very much. We were, in 1760, the world was as poor as they were 2,000, 20,000, 50,000 years earlier. The big jump, the big change occurred in the 1760s. Where all of these ideas that are very important to our lives exploded. The rhythm, the speed at which we invented exploded through the Industrial Revolution. And there have been many Industrial Revolutions. The initial Industrial Revolution, which was based on a steam engine, changed dramatically the way we produce. It changed the plants and also the factories, and also the way we transport with trains and boats. The second Industrial Revolution, associated with the internal combustion engine and electricity, changed the world in the 20th century with transportation, with cars, but also it changed the homes. It freed actually the women from staying home and introduced her to the labor force. Then came the digital revolution with computers, with the cell phone revolution, and so on. And now we are in the middle of the fourth Industrial Revolution, where the speed of innovation continuously changes. We are merging the real world, the digital world, and the biological world in one place. Very soon we're going to have implants that are partly biological, partly digital, that are going to help us think and act and work and walk and live. Robotics, cloud computing, sensors, big data, digital manufacturing, synthetic biology, digital medicine, nanomaterials, artificial intelligence. All kinds of great stuff coming our way at a speed that we have never seen before. Now the key question is, what happened in the 1760s? How did that accelerate the world? Now Douglas North, which is one of the two historians ever to win the Economics Nobel Prize, said that what happened in the 1760s was that we invented the patent system. Ideas have another characteristic. They are non-rival. But many of them, unless there is a law, many of them are also non-excludable. Non-excludable means you cannot prevent people from using them. You cannot prevent people from using the Pythagoras theorem. Even if the Romanian government passed a law saying people cannot use the Pythagoras theorem unless they pay royalties to the Pythagoras family, you cannot implement that law, right? Because people can use the Pythagoras theorem in their heads. You can put people in jail with their eyes closed and the hands behind their back, and they can still go a squared equals b squared plus c squared. Right? Now some ideas can be excluded. Some ideas we can pass laws saying people cannot use the steam engine unless they pay a price, they pay a royalty to Mr. Watt. Okay? Now, when we introduce and this is very important, because if you cannot prevent people from using an idea, the inventor cannot charge, right? Pythagoras can never be rich if people can use his idea for free. He can only be rich if he can prevent people from stealing his idea. If we have a law, a patent law. And therefore, Douglas North says that the Industrial Revolution occurred in England, and it occurred in the 1760s, because it was in England and in the 1760s that we introduced the patent system. And this is what actually led economic research through almost today. All theories of economic growth, including those that were cited by Professor Litton, were based, all theories of economic growth and ideas were based on R&D, patents. And and by the way, you can read all of these in a wonderful book called Economic Growth, written by Robert Barrow and me, which I recommend. It makes a great Christmas gift for grandmas, so I recommend you buy it. There's only one little problem with this book, and that is wrong. And how do I know it's wrong? How do I know that all of this research that we did in the 1990s and 2000s is wrong? Do you recognize this? If I made this speech 10 years ago, and I asked you, show me your phones, most of you would show me a Nokia. Nokia completely dominated the market. Everybody had Nokias. In fact, even today, of the 10 most widely used phones in history, 8 were produced by Nokia. The 2 best sellers in the history of the world, 250 million units each, are the 1100 and the 1110. Remember the black and white screens? 250 million copies were sold of this phone. Nokia was an empire. Nokia dominated the world. In fact, Nokia, compared to other companies in the same sector, and this is the amount of R&D they spent, Nokia was the highest spender in R&D in the entire sector. Better than RIM. RIM was the producer of BlackBerry. Even bigger than Apple, which is one of the companies that invest the least. Even compared to companies in other sectors, this is the highest spending in R&D in all the companies in the world. Nokia is number 5, spending similar amounts to companies that live out of R&D, like pharmaceuticals, or car companies, or computer companies. Number 1 is Microsoft. So, spending tons and tons and tons of money in R&D. Do you know where Nokia is today? Well, Nokia's stock value was at $56 a share in the year 2000. Nokia went bankrupt. In the year 2013, was purchased by Microsoft for $3 a share. 95% of the value was gone. Despite the fact that they were leaders in R&D. R&D did not actually lead Nokia didn't allow Nokia even to survive, not be a leader, to survive. R&D was not the key. R&D is not the key to ideas. What is the key to the creation of ideas? Well, let's look at the world and tell me, when I show you these pictures, tell me what you think they have in common. What do you think these pictures have in common? Starbucks, Cirque du Soleil, Zara, McDonald's, IKEA. What do they have in common? Well, obviously, they are great business ideas. There's no question that they are incredibly great business ideas. Business ideas in very traditional sectors. Notice that the companies that I chose, they are in the clothing business. Again, we invented the needle 40,000 years ago. 40,000 years after we invent clothing, Amancio Ortega innovates in the field of clothing. The Romans had circuses 2,000 years ago. 2,000 years later, Cirque du Soleil innovates in the world of circus. The cavemen had furniture, right? 15,000 years later, IKEA innovates in furniture. Very, very old traditional sectors, very different from cellular technology, pharmaceuticals, right? Traditional sectors also innovate. But the key of what these pictures have in common, the key is that none of those ideas, none of those great ideas came from R&D, or they were awarded a single patent. None of these inventors were scientists. They spent $0 in R&D, no patent. They're completely outside the way we think, we economists think about ideas, which still is R&D and patents. In fact, Guy La Liberté or Cirque du Soleil was a street performer, right? These guys that are in the streets just juggling in front of cars. A clown. The creators of Starbucks were an English teacher, a history teacher, and a poet. IKEA was a student. McDonald's was a salesperson. Amancio Ortega of Zara was a worker. None of them was a scientist. In fact, if you look at the history of business ideas, 72% of ideas come from workers. 72%. 20% come from regular people that are not researchers or workers. Students, street performers, teachers, clowns, poets. Only 8% of ideas come from R&D. And those ideas are concentrated in those three sectors that I mentioned earlier. Pharma, ICTs, and cars. But those are this is the tiniest part of the economy. The rest of the economy also innovates. So we economists are forgetting the majority of innovations. Now, where do these innovations come from? Why do these people innovate? Why did the guy at Cirque du Soleil, Guy La Liberté, create the Cirque du Soleil when he didn't have patents? The Chinese can copycat his circus the minute after he invents it. Why did he go through the trouble of inventing Cirque du Soleil? Why did Amancio Ortega create Zara? Well, the key comes from my friend, Pep Guardiola. Pep Guardiola is a coach, okay? And he's also my best man at my wedding. Good friend of mine. Now, he has an innovation problem every game. Every game he has to innovate. Every game he has to change something. Right? He has to change position of one of the players, to change the defense, change the offense. And he knows that his innovation is going to last maybe one game, if he's lucky. If he's not lucky, at halftime, the other coach is going to see what he's doing and they're going to react. Right? He doesn't have patents, but he has to innovate continuously. Now, the fact that he can get an advantage for 45 minutes, maybe 90 minutes, for him, that's enough. And then next game, he's going to innovate again, and again, and again, and again. Every game, he's going to have to do something different, something new, innovate. So what drives him is not the patent. What drives him is the ability to do something different, even if it's for a short period of time. Now, everybody can do what Zara is doing. Everybody can do what IKEA is doing. But for a while, these companies had an advantage. They took advantage of this advantage. They built a brand, and that was enough for them. And that's how we economists should think about this. And therefore, when we think about the economics of ideas, we understand that the engine of growth is ideas. But the key question is, how do we create a society where our students, our teachers, our poets, our street performers, our footballers are creative enough to come up with ideas? If we want an innovative society, 92% of ideas are going to come from these people. So we better have creative people that are able to innovate. And the question is, therefore, how do we create these people? The answer is human capital. How do we educate them? So again, in my mind, the engine of growth is ideas. But the action has nothing to do with the patent system of the laws. The action has to be at the human capital level. Education is the key. Now, there's one little problem with education, and that is that it's very slow. It has not changed. This is a picture of a typical classroom of a typical country. Right? Millions of classrooms look the same way today. If you took a picture 200 years ago, which you couldn't because pictures had not been invented yet, but if you look at paintings of classrooms 200 years ago, they look exactly the same. Same tables, same chairs, same boards, same erasers, same chalk, and in some classrooms even the same teacher. Nothing has changed in most of the classrooms. But the world has changed dramatically. See, this is a picture of my niece. This last Christmas, my niece is 1.5 years old, so I gave her a book. This is her reaction when she receives the book. What does she do? She opens the book and she starts pressing the words. When she realizes that nothing happens when she presses the words, she concludes I've given her a broken iPad, so she throws it away. And she starts playing with her father's iPhone, right? Have you seen babies play with iPhones? How do they know how to do it? It's magic. It's like if they had intrauterine iPhones to practice with before they were born. They are born and they can start immediately playing with the iPhone. The world has changed in dramatic ways, in ways that actually undermine the foundations of the education system. For example, one of the foundations of the education system is that the teacher knows more than the student. Right? The education system is basically the teacher knows, the student doesn't know, so we need to transmit the knowledge from the teacher to the student. Right? Now ask yourself what happens in any school in Romania when the computer breaks down. Who is the least qualified person to solve the problem? The teacher. Right? See, you know what? Everybody knows that, including the students. So when the students think, well, if this guy, this professor, this student, this guy doesn't know something as important as technology, they conclude correctly that therefore what he's teaching me is completely useless, right? Because the useful stuff he doesn't know. And they lose intellectual respect for their teachers. The world has changed and the school has not changed with it. Especially when we want students to become innovators, creators, and the ability to come up with ideas. So let me give you a few hints on what I think the education system would look like. By the way, the education system would look very different if we had concluded that the key to economic growth and the engine of economic growth was R&D. Right? If we think that the key is R&D, then the education system should essentially go around the country, select the best students who can potentially be researchers, put them in top schools, and teach them how to be scientists. And in the meantime, the rest of us can go to the bar and drink beers and wait for these clever people to come up with something that will help the rest of us. Right? But unfortunately, that's not how the world works, right? That's what we thought that was true in the 1990s. This is no longer what I think is true. If we want people to come up with ideas, then we need to not train the best students, we need to train all of the students. Universal education, good education for everybody. which means that we should act mostly at the primary school level. We need to train poets. We need to train street performers, students, English teachers. Everybody has to be creative and innovative. So that changes dramatically the way we should think of the education system. Now, let me give you 7 keys to what I think we should be doing in primary schools, but because we are at the university, focus on things that we should also do at the university level. Okay? So let me give you 7 keys to education to have an innovative society. Number 1, the key to the learning process is the question. Now, the education system basically focuses on the answer. Right? We teach our students to answer problems. We, the professors, ask the questions in the exam. You, student, respond. And we train you to answer questions. Right? We very rarely train to ask questions. But questions actually are the key to innovation. I had the privilege of meeting Amancio Ortega. You know, Amancio Ortega is now one of the richest men in the world. He invented Zara. He's a very private man. There are very few pictures of him. Nobody knows how he looks like. He'd never given an interview to anybody. So I met him at a wedding and I asked, that Zara is actually taught in business schools. You are a great innovator. And he says, what? What is innovation? I don't even know what innovation is. You know what? He told me, the only thing I do is I ask questions. And I ask 2 kinds of questions. Number 1, I ask, why? I need to understand everything. By the way, it's something that Steve Jobs always used to say. I need to understand every piece of a computer. Why do we do that? Can we get rid of it? Why? Now, when he doesn't understand, then he has the second kind of question. The question that enhances creativity. Why not? Why don't we do it differently? Okay? And with this attitude, he revolutionized the world. We actually produce clothes in the world. Instead of producing clothes twice a year with 2 collections, he produces a collection every week. Instead of producing in developing countries far away, he produces clothes to the market. He changed the way we produce clothes, which has been the same since Christian Dior invented pret-à-porter in the 1920s. Now, do we teach our students to ask questions? What happens to students that ask too many questions? What happens when somebody in your class asks many questions? Do you stop that person? What happens to a little kid? And asks too many questions. Does the mother get a letter from the teacher saying, ask your child to shut up because I cannot go on? Right? We need to embrace curiosity. Without curiosity, without our ability to ask questions, we will never be able to be creative. If you are a student here, don't be afraid to ask. Continue to ask. Even if your professor says shut up, you continue to ask. Okay? See, the world is changing. I showed you, right? The 4th Industrial Revolution is going to sweep 50% of the jobs. We're going to have to change jobs continuously in the next 50 years. All of the information in the world you carry in your pocket, right? You carry in your pocket, in your smartphone, all information that human beings have produced through history, all of it is in your pocket. And there's only one barrier between you and that information, and that is you. You need to go and search it. You need to go and find. And in order to find, you need to ask yourself questions. You need to be curious. If you're not curious, all of that information is useless. Curiosity is the first key. Second, observation. We need to pay attention to what's going on in the world. IKEA. I gave you another example of innovation. IKEA. The key innovation of IKEA is the way they produce their furniture. Right? In the old days, furniture, production and delivery was essentially, you would go to the showroom, you would see a sofa, you would say, I want this sofa, and 6 months later they would send the sofa because they didn't have the sofa in the store. It was too expensive to store, right? And the invention of IKEA was that they produced the sofa in a pack, like this. Right? You want this sofa, you go downstairs, you grab the sofa, it's in a box, you put it in your car, you take it home. This is called flat packing, right? Now, do you know how they invented flat packing? Do you know who invented flat packing? Well, in fact, they were producing these chair back in the 1960s that looks like a leaf, like the famous IKEA table. IKEA used to be a normal furniture store in Sweden. This was a very famous table. So they decided to do an ad. This ad, they hired a photographer. The photographer said, well, this looks like a leaf. We're going to take pictures of this table in the forest. Now, he tried to put the table in his car to take it to the forest. It didn't fit. And because he was a photographer, he saw the legs. He cut the legs off, and he disassembled the table, and he could put it in the car and left. And Mr. Kamprad, the owner of IKEA, said, wow. And that's how he had it. He didn't have the idea, right? But he observed. He was paying attention. Now, do you pay attention to things in life? Do students pay attention to things in life? I'm not going to have time to do this, but do this in your mind. I do that with my students all the time. I give them 2 circles. Can you draw a bicycle? Can you draw a bicycle mentally? Try to draw a bicycle mentally. If you do, 90% of you are going to draw a line between the two wheels. Okay, something like this, which is a guarantee that you're not going to be able to turn the front wheel because there is a bar that doesn't allow to turn. 90% of you are going to do this. There are other crazy ways that people draw. These examples of students of mine, which, by the way, can be, if you try to implement them, look crazy, right? This is some kind of erotic bicycle. 95% of people don't know how to draw a bicycle. Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you know what a bicycle is? How many bicycles have you seen in your lives? Thousands, right? Why cannot you draw it? Because you never paid attention, right? By the way, this is how a bicycle looks like. You don't pay attention. Now, do you know what the best way to pay attention is? Drawing it. You know, artists have a very, very, very precise way of paying attention. They can see shades, they can see volumes, right? Try to paint. Art. Now, what is the role of art in our schools? Right, we have lots of priorities for math, for reading. Is there a priority for art? Everybody is trying to get up, move up the PISA exams. Is there a PISA exam for art? No, there is math, there is reading, there is science, no art. Nobody pays attention to art. And that is the worst thing we can do. Art should have a priority because that's the best way to be creative and to be observant. The role of art. Number 3, be critical. I had a meeting with the creator of Wikipedia in January. Okay, and I asked him, what do you think the worst part of the American education system is? And he says the lack of critical spirit. That's the creator of Wikipedia. Wikipedia, anybody can write anything on Wikipedia. Any stupid thing you can imagine you can put in Wikipedia, and the rest of the world reads it. And they believe it. Right? Oh, I found it in Wikipedia, therefore it must be true. Right? I found it on the internet, it must be true. People vote for crazy orange people, in elections, because they get lied and they cannot tell whether they're being lied. Critical spirit is very important. Now, ideas are like dice. The way I think of ideas is like dice. So if I'm on this side of the dice, and you ask me what is it, I'm going to say, well, it's a white wall with 1 dot. If you are in the other side, you're going to say, it's a white wall with 6 dots. And I can prove that I'm right. I can take a picture and send it to you through WhatsApp. See, it's 1 dot. And he's going to be able to send a picture to me and say, no, it's 6 dots. And we are both right, and none of us are right. This is not a wall, these are 6 walls. This is a dice. Ideas have many perspectives, and depending on how you see it, you're going to see it one way or another. There is always another perspective. Now the question is, do we teach our students that the world has many perspectives, or do we teach them this is the truth? This is Keynesian economics, right? This is how the world works. No, that's not how the world works. The truth is very fluid. What we think changes over time. What we think changes depending on how we see. The world is full of perspectives. So how do I teach? Okay, we at Columbia, my class, two teachers teach the same class. And we try to put two teachers with very different views of the world. I teach introductory macroeconomics at the PhD level, and the co-teacher of mine is Joe Stiglitz, who has an entirely different view of the world, crashes my view of the world. And when I teach, he's sitting with the students, and when he teaches, I sit with the students. And the students see my perspective, and they say, wow, that's very convincing. And then Stiglitz comes in and teaches exactly the opposite, and the students say, wow, that's very convincing. So which one is true? We should also teach, another thing we teach is cross-teaching. Oh, you are a good classical economist? Okay, you're going to teach Keynesian economics. You're going to teach exactly the opposite. Okay? And you're not going to teach just to criticize. Oh, I'm going to teach socialist economies just to crash it all over. No. You're going to have to defend it. Try to put yourself in the perspective of the other. We should invite our students to find problems with our views. When you do the problem sets, try to find problems that actually are not coincident with what you teach. So the students get confused. Okay, try to teach the students that there's no truth. There's no truth. Truth changes. Truth is fluid. What we believe today is not what we are going to believe tomorrow. 4, collaborate. Education system is based on competition. The best student gets the best jobs. Compete for grades, compete for jobs, compete for money. But ideas usually come from cooperation. Ideas very rarely come from the eureka moment. A eureka moment is an expression that comes from Archimedes. Archimedes was a great mathematician, expert on geometry. He computed the volumes of perfect sphere, the volume of a sphere, the volume of a cone, the volume of a pyramid. So the king asked him, how much gold? What is the volume of my? What is the volume of gold in my crown? And of course, the crown was not a perfect sphere or a perfect cone, so he couldn't tell. Okay, so legend says that one day he was taking a bath with the crown. You know, the typical day that you take a bath with the crown of the king. And he puts the crown in the water, and the water rises. And he says, "Eureka! I found it." And he found what is known as the Archimedes principle, that says that the volume of the crown is exactly the same as the amount of water it displaced. Well, the key here is not the principle, the key is eureka. Ideas do not come from eureka moments. Right? Newton did not invent the laws of gravity because of the apple. Right? He spent years and years thinking and looking at Copernicus and Galileo and so on and so forth to come up with a theory. Darwin took 25 years to come up with a theory of evolution through natural selection. Okay, and ideas get changed and perfected through human interaction. This is known as the Medici effect. Right, the Medici effect. Florence is the heart of the Renaissance, because the Medici, a family of bankers, paid all kinds of mathematicians, scientists, astronomers, painters, architects, all to go to Florence, and this interaction across all of these people is what made knowledge flourish. If you ask where exactly in a company ideas are created, where is the physical location where ideas take place? Is it the desk of the CEO? Is it the innovation department? The answer is no. It's the water cooler. Because that's where people meet. That's where people talk. Ideas come from human interaction. Now, in practice, this means that we should foster, right? We tend to examine people by individual effort, right? Individual exams. We should do more study groups, group papers, group exams, group evaluations, things of this sort, because that's what students will find when they go out in the real world, right? When you go out in the real world, those of you who are in the real world, outside academia, when you have a problem, what are the first two things that you do? Number one, you Google. Number two, you ask someone. These are the two things that you are not allowed to do in an exam. Right? So we are teaching students to do things that they're not going to be able to do in the real world. That should change. 5, we should embrace uncertainty. Okay? We know less than we think, even though we are professors. We know less than we think. We are ignorant about many, many things, yet we continuously teach what we think as if it was the truth. Now, neurologists say that by introducing doubts in the human brain, in the brain of our students, we actually encourage curiosity. Right? If you tell the students this is the truth, they're not going to ask questions. If you say, well, we don't know, then the student will inquire, will get curiosity, and therefore will find, and therefore will be innovative. Right? We should learn without being embarrassed. We should practice something. We should say very often, I don't know. There's nothing wrong with not knowing. And this is true for professors here, and it's true for parents. Right? When your children ask you, and you don't know, don't pretend you know. Say, I don't know, but we can find out. Let's find out together. Right? We shouldn't underestimate the limits of our ignorance. Okay? I know that we are here to teach facts, to teach truth. But we should try to teach also the boundaries of our ignorance. And by the way, remember the house of ideas? Every room is a piece of knowledge, and every piece of knowledge has 3 or 4 doors that lead to new rooms. Notice that the more rooms we have, the more unopened doors we have. So the more we know, the more ignorant we are. The more we discover, the more there is to be discovered, because every door opens a room, and every room has new doors. So notice the amount of doors that now we have at the frontiers of knowledge. It's unbelievable. Yet we continue to teach children and students as we know. So what do I recommend here? Practice with me. I don't know. There's nothing wrong with not knowing. Even professors should confess that sometimes we don't know. We should invite students to find mistakes in our theories. We should invite them. We should actually write problem sets that contradict what we told them. Usually we write problem sets so they confirm what we taught. Right? We taught Keynesian theory, then the problem set, the answer is exactly what the professor said in class. Give them problem sets that contradict that. Help them think. Help them be confused. To be profoundly confused is to be deeply informed. Okay? 6. Connect. Ideas are usually recombination of ideas. Or as philosopher Max Riley says, ideas have sex. Ideas come from uniting 2 ideas. Right? You put together Henry Ford's production line with cars, with hamburgers, you get McDonald's. You put together McDonald's and pizza, you get Pizza Hut. Right? Ideas are the intersection of other ideas. Ideas have sex. One example of this is Cirque du Soleil. Circus was dying. Right? All of a sudden, people didn't want to go to the circus anymore. People hated seeing the stupid lions and the elephants and the clowns that were not funny and the same jugglers all the time. The circus was dying until Guy Laliberté came and said, well, let's get rid of the lions, let's get rid of the animals, let's get rid of the famous families that nobody knows, families of jugglers or clowns, and we're going to merge. We're going to merge the Broadway music and theatrics. We're going to merge that with Olympic gymnasts and together with a theater. We're going to have a story to tell. And he created an entirely new genre, which has been incredibly successful and made him one of the richest men in the world. Now hundreds of Cirque du Soleils are operating around the world. He created a new genre. He saved the circus by essentially mixing ideas. So we should invite students to merge ideas within our field, within economics. Right? Every time we teach something about macro, we should relate that to labor, instead of having labor economic completely separate from micro, completely separate from statistics, completely separate from math. Right? Try to teach the students to do that, and also to learn across fields. We should encourage students to read. I read principles textbooks. I continue to read in psychology, in anthropology, in sociology, in medicine. You know what book I'm reading right now? A book on Cretaceous dinosaurs. Okay, why? I don't know. I don't like dinosaurs, but I like evolution. So why not? Right? Watch tech lectures on fields that are not yours. Okay, try to find things from other fields because most times the ideas will come from other places. Right? In your world, the solution to your problem might come from medicine. But you're never going to have the idea unless you know something about medicine or psychology or archaeology. Okay, so try to learn in other fields. And finally, implementation. Okay, we live in a world. We at the university level think that we live in a world that is separated from the rest of the world. Right? We learn the truth. And if it's useless for the rest of the world, that doesn't matter because it's the truth. Okay, we are in search for the truth. And if we have an idea, most of us, not all of us, but most of us, we're gonna have an ethical problem by, trying to implement it, create a company to exploit that idea. Okay, that's wrong. We should encourage people. We should encourage our students, especially at the primary level, but also at the university level. You should run to implement. Having useless knowledge stored in a library is not useful. In fact, do you remember the last scene of Raiders of the Lost Ark, where Indiana Jones, after fighting with the Nazis for the entire movie, he gets the Ark of the Covenant. He brings it back to the United States, and the U.S. government puts it in a box like this, a wooden box. And the last scene of the movie is that you see that they store it in this big room full of boxes with all the other discoveries of the history of the United States. Well, that same room is where all the non-implemented ideas are. If you had an idea, if you wrote a thesis in your dissertation and you never implemented, your idea is dead over there. Okay? Let me tell you one final story. In 1979, a young American who had a tiny computer company visited the Palo Alto Research Center, which is a research center that the Xerox Corporation had in Palo Alto. And 1979 is before personal computers, right? At the time, computers were the size of rooms, and there were terminals going from that computer, a terminal with a screen and a keyboard, and the way to communicate with the computer was the keyboard, right? Remember those days? The keyboard, you would write letters and numbers and forward slashes and backward slashes, and you wrote forward slash instead of backlash, then the computer would explode, right? And then he saw something magic. He saw a box like this, attached to a cable, and attached to a complicated mechanism that if you move the mechanism, an arrow would move in the screen. And when you click the red button, a window would open. And he said, wow. He said, how much is this box? They said, $300. So he left the Palo Alto Research Center. He called his friends in his company and said, I've seen the future. We need to create this box for $15. If we can get the price down for $15 to $15, we're going to revolutionize the world. And do you know what he did? He went to the pharmacy. He immediately had an idea that the way that we could do this cheaply was to introduce a sphere at the bottom of the mechanism. And when the mechanism rolled, the sphere would roll and some sensors would send the message to the computer. And who were the kings of spheres at the time? Deodorant. So he went to the pharmacy, he bought all the deodorants, and he opened the map and found about spheres and how do the deodorants hold the sphere. And he did the same thing. 2 years later, the Macintosh 2 was born. And this guy was Steve Jobs. He didn't invent a mouse. He observed, I mentioned earlier, observing, but most importantly, he rushed and produced it. He implemented it. Implementation is the key to innovation, which brings us back to Nokia. Why did Nokia fail? Well, now we know. We opened the Nokia books, the patent books, and we found that they had all the ingredients to produce an iPhone. the touch screen, everything. They could have produced the iPhone, but they never did. And now we know why they never did. You know why? Because they were making tons of money, as I was mentioning earlier, through the dumb phones. And the CEO said, well, if we produce an iPhone, we're going to kill our own market. If you study business, you know that they call this core business. When you hear somebody say core business, run away. Because the core business is the enemy of innovation. So, innovating, this is the key lesson. They did the R&D. They got the patents. They did everything my textbook said they should do. Yet they failed. And the reason is that in reality, the creation of knowledge did not come from the patent or from the R&D, but from the ability to run and implement. He didn't do that. Once again, the person who did it was Steve Jobs. Thank you very much.
Dear professor and colleague, we noticed that some minutes ago, an hour ago, for an hour, you were the teacher and we were the students. And at least one of the goals you mentioned was reached because we are confused. The good news for us is that in spite of the fact that we are teachers, we are dealing with ideas. The bad news is that our ideas are mainly useless because they are belonging to other people, not to us. At least most of them. But me, as a historian, I still have a hope, because one of your innovators you mentioned was a simple teacher of history. So even historians, who usually are useless, they are dealing with the past, could be useful. I am joking, because your lesson was a true lesson of history, according to my view, and it was another way of perceiving history, which is very encouraging for me as teacher of history, and it's encouraging for my colleagues, economists here present, because history of economical ideas and even general history of economies must be very useful for new and even revolutionary ideas. Thank you so much. Welcome in this huge family of our academic community. Thank you.
Thank you.